All right, let's try this again. Second time's the charm. We're gonna get this right. So let me actually post this in the chat first of all. All right, so I think now we're live. Let me know if you're able to see the actual feed. Go EOS. I see Blue Sky and Mastermind, and we're finally on. So this is really exciting, guys. I've been waiting to do an EOS video for a long time. And really the reason why we hadn't done one in such a while is really because there was nothing going on the network, frankly. So I don't know about you guys, but like I think since like the summer to where we're at right now, we hadn't actually seen any real news, any real changes in the price, which isn't really a bad thing. But I mean, I think there wasn't any real catalyst to do a video on EOS for. We don't want to just repeat news to you guys. It doesn't make any sense, right? So part of it was that. But in the meantime, you know, it's been a really interesting just time period, I guess, obviously with 19, which I'm not going to mention the first part of that, but I think y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And so for me, it's been interesting to see how even the workplace has changed. A lot of things has changed even in 6 months to the point where I don't know about you guys, but like 50, and I'll just, before we get into the EOS news, just start with this. We're doing most of our work, like 50% of our work, potentially from home at times. We do some field visits. What's really interesting, though, is it actually hasn't slowed down. It's actually sped up, which I wouldn't have expected for this type of, I guess, for 19 to do that. But we're actually more busy now than we've ever been. So that's interesting, I think, from that perspective, just more busy than probably more work than we can handle. So I'm really hoping next year maybe it slows down a little bit. And what I'm actually planning to do is get more into EOS like development and not as much engineering that I'm doing now. But for now, that's what pays the bills. And obviously it's allowing me to DCA into Bitcoin, which I've been doing with probably like most of you guys, almost every paycheck, which has been really good to see just over the past couple years, 8 years now. It's been a really cool journey just to see that progression on accumulation and wealth. So before we get into EOS news, it is also just something to reflect on is the macro environment we're in. We've seen that the stock market and crypto in general has gone up and down at times, but there's been a slope up with this expectation of more stimulus being printed or provided. And most recently, we've seen some talks by even the president mentioning that there would be another stimulus, stimulus bill passed of some kind, and that this would inject some new infusion into the economy. And with this news, it rocketed a lot of things, including Bitcoin. But even more interesting is we've seen a company like MicroStrategy, run by Michael Saylor, take on a huge bet of $425 million into Bitcoin, which is unprecedented, guys. And this week we saw Jack Dorsey from Twitter announce that Twitter had added $50 million to their portfolio. So what's going to be really interesting to see, guys, is over the course of the next, I'd say 6 to 9 months, how many other companies we're going to see start to do that. And the other potential interesting part is, will we see any of these companies start to look into exposure to other crypto assets beyond Bitcoin? Now, I think that is somewhat unlikely just because of how early we are and how fairly, I think this is a fair assessment, how immature some of these networks are, including EOS. So I think the risk, there's just still a perception of too much risk in the market for something like these smart contracts. But I think maybe as they mature, we could see a move like we're seeing in Bitcoin. And so Michael Saylor is an absolute gangster, in my opinion, for having the balls to um, basically take $500 million and invest in Bitcoin. Now, a lot of us are gangsters too because a lot of us are potentially irresponsibly long into these assets. So it is a pretty cool, I think, smaller club still in terms of having these assets and just being in a position to know the BS from the real, right? So again, 6 to 9 months, guys. Keep your eyes on that calendar date and start looking out for some potential other announcements by other companies looking to get exposure. Because I think what you're going to start seeing is people start to ask the questions during conference calls about why companies are not doing it if they've decided not to. And so that's kind of what I have in the back of my mind, and that could potentially propel the entire space, including EOS, substantially higher, potentially past all-time highs, beyond $20,000. So that's going to be interesting to see, guys. I'd love to know what you guys think. Have you been adding to your positions? Have you been DCAing with Phoenix, or are you just basically maintaining? It'd be interesting to hear what your strategies have been. I haven't really changed. Basically, I've been like a homie for the past several years, still being a homie, because that's how you're able to add more assets, right, and add more wealth. So just keep it basic. Got food, got water, got a good, got a decent job, and that's how to do it, I think. But and some consulting fees, because we got to have consulting fees, allegedly. So on to the EOS news, which is, I think, some of the most interesting news we've had in a long time in EOS. I mean, there was probably about a year that went by where we really didn't have any interesting news beyond I think some of the hype with like June 1st type of things that were internally created. We've finally received news, probably the first of its kind, of an outside entity actually stimulating some interest in EOS, right? Most of the news has been internally driven, I would say, either from Block One or from some of the organic BPs that have been a part of the community. And now we've seen this news by Google Cloud, in which they've announced that they intend to run as a block producer on the network on EOS mainnet. Now, this is substantial for a couple different reasons, but I also want to give you both perspectives. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to take on the perspective of analyzing how this could be really positive for the network, and what advantages there would be for that. And we're also going to take on the view of how this could be very similar to some of the other moves we've seen on the other chains as it relates to interest from Google. And so I was able to find some articles, and I'd like to share that with you guys and get some thoughts and stimulate some conversations on what it is you guys think is in store next for EOS as a network, as a community. What are some of the issues we have right now that seem to hinder us from, I think, from an adoption, from an interest perspective, even from an investment perspective? I want to go through that tonight and give you guys my thoughts. So on the subject of Google Cloud, what did they do? Again, they mentioned interest to become a BP. Why is that important? Well, EOS right now, even though we are OGs in EOS, most of the people here, we got Viz, we got Blue Sky, we got Mastermind. We had, I think Rezi was in the mix for a while. Hopefully he's tuning in and can hear this link. I had some issues with the other link, so I apologize for that. But so if you guys could share this link in the channels, that'd be great. But I guess even though we're hardcore OGs in EOS, I think there's still a lot of like skepticism on what EOS actually is, what value it could potentially provide, and who the actual BPs are. So whenever you can get a company that is more legitimized in the technology space, more legitimate in the technology space, like a Google, okay, a Google Cloud. That's going to, I think, whether they like it or not, force people to take a look at what EOS is. What is it that made Google Cloud have an interest in becoming a BP for this network? Because there's a whole host of networks and systems, and there's a limited resource on money and workforce, frankly. So for Google as a big company to take on an interest, at least on an initial basis, of becoming a BP on EOS, it says a lot about the network. It says a lot about the value that the build, at least in terms of the code base and what is potentially available. Now, the other perspective we could take in this is that Google Cloud themselves have expressed interest in other types of projects in the past. So on the one hand, having Google Cloud being brought onto EOS is neat to see. It does bring legitimacy to the network in some ways. It brings maybe some more trust from some perspectives, outside the blockchain space. Hearing Google associated with this would be good. Now, maybe in the traditional blockchain space, there's questions about security or I would say privacy, maybe. But Google Cloud particularly has been making some strategic moves in the past year to 2 years. And I've done some research and I want to share that with you guys today, just to kind of give you some perspectives and let you guys know that this move is not necessarily unique to EOS. So we need to kind of, take this sort of with a grain of salt until we're able to see a little bit more about what Google Cloud as a BP intends to do on the network. So back in, I think it was April of this year, Google Cloud announced that they were actually going to make a partnership with Ontology. Or I'm sorry, it was July of this year, July of 2020. Ontology became an official partner of Google Cloud. And what that meant in this partnership was that Ontology would rely on Google Cloud's services. And then they would also take part in Google's Next On Air event, a virtual event with breakout sessions, digital demos, and one-on-one sessions with Google experts. So you can see that Google has expressed interest in something like an Ontology. Maybe there was a synergistic partnership there. Obviously, the word partnership probably need to take with a grain of salt anyway, because we've seen the just in sun moves with a lot of these networks, which we've seen that some folks have marketed themselves as having a partnership with another company, when in fact it was the company using Google's cloud services to provide data to end users. I don't think that's the case here, so I just wanted to mention that one. There was also another one in May of this year, May of 2020, and this network was the Theta network, and they announced Google would serve as one of its nodes along with Binance and blockchain.com. And what that meant for that network, the Theta network, is that the companies, those three companies, would be partially responsible for validating Theta's crypto transactions. And Google Cloud is also Theta's preferred cloud provider, and users are now able to deploy their own Theta node from Google Cloud Marketplace with virtually no effort. So that did give the Theta network a temporary boost, actually of a threefold type move. We haven't seen the same moves in EOS, but that is yet another example for you guys showing Google Cloud's interest in a lot of these chains. And then the last one I will mention to you guys is, or the more substantial one here, is last year Chainlink. So last year Google Cloud integrated Chainlink's blockchain oracles with its own data sets. And what that allowed is Ethereum's developers to make use of crypto price data within projects such as prediction markets, futures contracts, and transaction privacy. Now, it's important to note that this particular integration was not technically a partnership, despite the fact that crypto media treated it as such. Regardless, the news gave Chainlink a significant boost in value, and that was around a 3x type move. Um, but again, it wasn't an official partnership. So, based on this review, at least from a preliminary standpoint, it seems like this announcement by Google Cloud to become a BP on EOS is a little bit unique than some of these other things that we've just reviewed as a community, right? We've seen Google Cloud have some interest in providing services, or maybe those companies reaching out to Google Cloud to become exclusive providers. This feels like it could be a little bit different. So we're just going to have to continue to, I think, do a little bit more research and see what Google Cloud as a BP comes out with in terms of their communications to the community. And I'm wondering, here's a question for everybody, including Cody and everybody else on this excellent and inspiring chat tonight. Are you guys already voting for Google Cloud as a BP? They are out, as you guys might know. So they have an account. I don't have it. I don't, this isn't a really organized live chat, so it's not like the Everything EOS where everything is laid out. But if you go to the Everything EOS channel, shout out to Zach Gall, you can find that someone was able to actually find their account. And there's already been some discussions about whether other voting communities have started to vote for Google Cloud BP, right? That's going to be interesting to see. So we're just going to have to see about that, guys. It sounded like I got the impression in reading what some other BPs were saying, or some other influential people in the community, Google Cloud as a BP was still getting their requirements in order and sort of and sort of like figuring out what they needed to actually start the process, right, to actually produce blocks. So it might be some time, guys, before we actually see them. So that's what's going on there, guys. Again, pretty big news, but what could it mean? Okay, so if we go into a little bit of speculation mode, and obviously none of this is investment advice, so we got to take it with a grain of salt. But where could this be going? Well, we know that a lot of companies, Google, Facebook, potentially even Amazon, right, have been scrutinized recently for user data privacy. I think competition in markets and providing somewhat more of a fair, or the appearance of a fair playing field in these types of systems and platforms, whether it's social networking or other types of merchant type systems. We could be seeing Google Cloud maybe recognize what happened in the server space, right, for how websites are now produced. So let's back up and maybe digest a little bit. So back in the day, way back in the day before we were all born, right, they had these huge rooms that were called mainframes. And so the mainframes were the predominant way to basically produce computations for different types of analysis that someone would be doing. That eventually evolved to more of a smaller computer or a personal computer with servers, and you're able to host your website maybe on a smaller server that you yourself purchased, or you went to a specific IT facility and purchased that specific computer and hosted your website on there, and your different services you develop on your own. So you coded all your stuff on your own, and everything was very customized for your application, which, I mean, maybe had some advantages, but for a lot of people, what it meant was the cost for actually starting a business on the web, the cost for hosting was tremendous. The cost to actually develop a application was huge, in the orders of magnitude of tens of millions of dollars, right? In some cases, in the very early days, that eventually evolved to maybe the personal space, and so the costs came down a bit. Maybe in the $1 million range, or maybe a little less than that, but it was still out of the reach of what most people could do and could provide. And then recently we've seen this emergence of cloud services, right? And so what that meant, guys, is that initially it just meant the hardware systems themselves became widely available to everybody. So if you had a website, if you had an idea and you wanted a website, instead of you having to go out and buy um, hardware and start, create your own server and hire a system admin and pay for all the bandwidth at your facility, you could now go to a cloud provider such as Amazon or Google or Microsoft, and they would provide the hardware, maybe a basic operating system, and the bandwidth to facilitate commerce or whatever you wanted to do with your website. And since then, you've actually seen a slight additional evolution, I would say, in the sense that not only are these providers, providing cloud services in terms of storage for different systems and the hardware and the bandwidth and all these things to actually support these web applications, but we've also seen these stacks, right? What you would call these web stacks of of how you actually develop an application on the cloud systems themselves. And so what that has resulted in is enabling companies, right, startups, to even with less cost launch their services and their applications, which is pretty cool. So now the price has gone down from maybe $1 million to maybe even $100,000. I mean, it depends on obviously the sweat equity, but that's the order of magnitude, guys, that has been discussed. And it's interesting because I did some other research on the new Goldman Sachs, or the former Goldman Sachs chief there that Block One just hired, and he had a whole video about this. So I thought it was very interesting that he mentioned that. This was probably about 10 years ago. He did a whole video on this, but it's really fascinating. But where do we think it's going after this? So again, you had those stages of evolution, right? And we can call it probably like 3 stages. You had the mainframe, then you had the personal computer, then you had this cloud, and then you had like this the next 3.B stage, which was these stacks that if you go to any website like Google Cloud, you can get these different solutions, and it's like 1-2 clicks and you have all these things available to you. Boom, it's ready, right? With a few different things, you can basically launch your website in an hour, maybe, half a day, whereas it would have taken you probably months to do that in the past. And so where do I think it's going? Why would Google Cloud want to be a BP on EOS? Let's get down to it, guys. Speculation time, Phoenix style. So this could be Google Cloud's interest in providing fintech solutions, enterprise grade fintech solutions, consumer grade fintech solutions. And why? Well, first of all, a big part of running a business, running an e-commerce business often is the e-commerce support, right? And all the money that it takes to actually form that in a global world. And so when you think about all the connectivity between the different financial systems and banks, KYC, right? All these things that come up, all these potential products that are commonly needed by a lot of different businesses, whether it's just-in-time type businesses, last mile businesses, right? Delivery businesses. These are all integral facets of how today's economy runs. Now, if you were able as a participant in this let's call it global computer, develop solutions that enable anyone around the world virtually, or maybe certain areas in the world, to have essentially fintech cement. Um, and what do I mean by that? Well, fintech cement would consist of maybe having common standard of IDs that is recognized on a global basis that any user could tie into or use at their own discretion, of course. Different facets for maybe Oracle services that are recognized as uh, meeting some standards, right? That could be used for insurance companies, for example, that want to then build their solutions on this application. When you want to look at different types of services and solutions that could be based on real assets, like real estate, again, there's a need for those types of systems and legitimacy of the companies that are running them. Very much like sort of we have today, but without the transparency, unfortunately. We don't have that today, right? So this is opening those up potentially with these companies that start to emerge and become uh, incumbents maybe within a federated computing network, which is what EOS actually is. Now, right now, we have a lot of indie BPs, and there's nothing wrong with indie BPs, but I think what you could be seeing, similar to what we discussed with the hodlers of Bitcoin, right? A lot of indies, like a lot of small holders hold Bitcoin today. But I think over time, what you're going to see is just like hodlers of Bitcoin, you're going to see a transition on which BPs run EOS. And you're going to see maybe many more of them become technology incumbents that we are know, right? Know, and for the most part, I think from different respects, are recognized, right, as leaders in the space, in some space, in their space, maybe. Now, there could be some questions about their integrity for privacy. I mean, it comes with some costs. So, obviously, with that, there is alternative chains that are based on EOSIO. So that would be one thing to consider. But I still think that you guys and I think everybody knows this on this video. We have to take a step back often because we're thinking about this more like OG crypto holders. When I think from some respects, we need to think about this like a boomer would think about it. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if you told a boomer, and no offense to any of my boomer viewers on this line or on this video, but if you told any boomer viewers to trust a network of block producers with EOS Nation or Binance even or any of these really Bitfinex, whatever the heck we have right now on the EOS network. I'm going to be honest with you guys, because I've had conversations with a lot of boomers and even like some older millennials, and they laugh at my face when I tell them about these people or tell them about these groups that we need to trust because they don't have any context for who these people are. And so one of the challenges with cryptocurrencies in general, beyond just the hurdles with holding Bitcoin and getting keys and all these things that I've just described in the first half of this video, the other issue is, okay, maybe once they understand what this network like EOS could do, how would we expect that they would be able to trust the BPs of this network? They don't even know them, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, guys, I think that's a big part of any network like this in the trust category. Now, we can argue about what aspect of trust because there would be different types, like the security of the network, maybe the ability to know for sure that transaction will be processed. There's a lot that we could say there, but I think that is what this type of a move brings. And so I wanted to have um, that conversation with you guys and see what you guys thought about it. So there's a couple questions here, or there is a question. Viz had a question about um, the community's view on Google Cloud earning BP rewards, and he asked if there's thoughts that maybe Google Cloud will give the rewards back to the EOS community, and how so. Well, I think that is very possible because Google Cloud has already actually mentioned or clarified that they don't intend to take the rewards. So that already right there starts to imply that they're probably going to be giving those back to the US community. Now, how would they do that? I don't really know, guys, and that's part of the interest here, or part of the mystery that we'll have to see as this evolves over time. But I do think that beyond just the rewards, because the rewards, in a sense, are very, and I don't want to take away from the rewards or the discussion on rewards or earning some returns of some kind for voting for something like Google Cloud. I think really what you're getting from Google Cloud in voting for them is two things. One, you're bringing visibility to the EOS network, legitimacy to the EOS network, in a sense that Google Cloud comes with some reputation around the world, whether we want to admit it or not. A lot of Fortune 500 companies, a lot of institutions run on Google Cloud. That says a lot that they're interested in EOS as a network. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, because they're not taking a reward, that sort of implies they have a different type of motivation. And that motivation is likely, speculation time again, probably has to do with some new products and services that require a federated network, right? So instead of, and so the business model may be changing. There may be an opportunity for leveraging a different kind of business model that most people haven't seen yet. Now, we saw that a little bit with the cloud in general, right? In the sense that the cloud gave, again, hardware, it gave some application stacks, it gave the bandwidth to run a basic company, with some minor e-commerce stuff. Now, if you take that to the next level, once again, guys, you could be looking at Google Cloud, recognizing that maybe there's an opportunity to do that with fintech, but do it for the masses. So again, the DeFi that you've seen in the space, and this is not to take away from Ethereum or anything on EOS, but that DeFi, guys, is not something that any of our siblings, anybody outside the crypto space would be interested in, because a lot of it is, I may get some slack for this, but a lot of it is just crap. A lot of it is just speculation, and there's no real utility to the DeFi application that folks are building. So, what do I mean by DeFi? Well, what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking that could be built on this federated network would be insurance products, would be financial products for assets ownerships of different kind, where it goes back to the classic EOS pitch, right? Which was reinventing the way companies even do business, in which the consumer is an investor, is potentially a worker. So you start to really bring in those aspects into EOS potentially, right? Now, we don't know that for sure, but we have some hints from Dan Larimer that there is some financial products that are going to come out really soon. So that's kind of where I think we are at right now, guys. I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying strong. And I hope that, really this trough, if you will, in crypto hasn't gotten you guys down. You're staying conservative with your DCAing, and you have, the ability to get income in to ride this out. As someone who's been in crypto for a long time, Bitcoin sub $1,000, you're going to have ups and downs. So you got to be able to produce value, have some income, and just let people start to understand this. It's going to take a long time, and we could be looking at you know, so much more time for most people to start to get this space. But there are some encouraging signs, especially with, again, MicroStrategy and Twitter taking realm. We're seeing some moves in EOS. So it's really exciting, guys. And I'm so happy to be along with you guys on this journey. So, with that, guys, I think until next time, we'll leave it here for now. And once we hear some more news on the Google Cloud BP, I will definitely be doing another video. Oh, you know what? Before we go, I did want to mention something else, though, something that's been on my mind. So, I mean, this whole news by Google Cloud as a BP is amazing. This recent news that Block One has hired Marty Chavez from Google, or I'm sorry, from Goldman Sachs is is news. I guess we'll have to see what he's about and how he influences the culture and the innovation maybe at Block One. But beyond that, I think we still have this marketing issue with EOS. Okay, so and this is something I'm wondering if somebody like a Marty will help start to have the conversation at Block One. And I don't mean this in an insulting. Listen, this progress by on EOS and the contributions by Block One. Um, Obviously, none of this would be possible, right, if they didn't really deliver some core aspects of the network that allow it to function today and remain as one of the most high throughput and fastest chains within the entire space. But with that said, I think we do need to recognize some of the challenges with that. And they include such things as the onboarding process for smaller users or new users. And so, when I think back to, and when I think even now about EOS, the onboarding process and the complexity of it it's just way too much, guys, for most people to even want to try or have the ability to try. And so we really need to see, I think that is part of the marketing issue here, is just the difficulty in all the steps and all the things that are needed to get on to EOS. And so we shouldn't be making things more complex. We should be making things less complex. And I'm not sure that as a community, I would say, and even to Block One with even this recent proposal for this change in resources, I'm not sure there's been enough I guess, focus on the user experiences for the chain. And so I wonder if that'll be a detriment to the network. I mean, that is a potential risk here that I think we all have to recognize. And so I'm wondering, guys, when do you think that you'll see that focus or type of view from someone like Block One? Because as of right now, as many people in the network know, like voice doesn't run on the mainnet. So we haven't actually seen an example of best practices for an application on the mainnet. So we don't really know what that looks like. And so no one's really, in my opinion, tackled this user experience onboarding issue on the network. So that's something that we'll have to just continue to look at and keep our eyes on. And so that remains, I think, a major reason why we haven't seen EOS actually add more users just organically, because it is just way too hard to bring on new users. It is difficult even for crypto users. Yeah, I mean, Blue Sky said it. It's difficult even for OG crypto users to understand how this works. And so they just throw up their hands because it's just way too hard. There's way too many rules, and we haven't seen even one application, I think, tackle it in a mass user adoption kind of way. We have some workarounds here and there, but it's very frustrating for a lot of people. And so, as much as Dan Larimer likes to, and he is rightfully so, point out some of the weaknesses with Ethereum, part of being a good leader is recognizing the weaknesses that your creations have, right? I mean, if I'm an engineer and I'm making and I'm making different systems here, and I make different systems here. You know, part of it is just, well, my systems can be better in some ways and more resilient and safer and more robust than others here. But you know, uh, every system has weaknesses, and so really the good engineers and the good innovators, I think they actually don't focus on what they're good at or what their systems have that is so good. They focus actually on what's like what needs work, and instead of like putting others down, they focus in on those things and they tackle it and they come up with a solution that actually um, levels up their product right above the competitors. Because again, right now, that is actually worse than, I mean, in some cases, that's actually worse than the Ethereum thing. The Ethereum, they're facing the issues because they have so many transactions relative to the capacity of their network. On EOS, we don't even have the demand because the experience itself is just, it's just the onboarding process is just so tragic, unfortunately. So I would say let's fix that first before we go start spreading, before we start putting like Nas like disses on other networks when we ourselves don't have it together. But that would just be my own last point I wanted to make, and hopefully the folks at Block One are working on that. I know there's a challenge with doing that in a sense that it could be a vulnerability for creating just easily creating accounts for everybody. So it can't be like an Oprah meme kind of a thing. You need a, you know, there needs to be kind of a balance in how that would be done. So I think that development is still underway, but that still remains to be a challenge. And again, we haven't seen that from Block One on the mainnet, how the free accounts aspect can be solved. But I think once that is, guys, and with a legitimate application on the network, I think that's when you're going to start to see moves in terms of the appreciation in price. So I'll just leave it at that, guys. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in for the almost 45 minutes on the chat tonight. If you guys like this video, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to this channel, and do your own videos too, because I'd love to actually show up. I love showing up to different events. So if you know of an event, or even if it's a in-person event, I love going to different events for EOS. And that's something that, even with the COVID thing, has been a little tragic, actually, because we used to have so many awesome events in DC, San Francisco, all these spots. And so now without those, and even here in Phoenix, we used to have a lot of them. But, with the COVID situation, it makes it challenging to do. And I think also just a lot of people, believe it or not, well, you guys can believe this, but a lot of people just, especially here locally, I think they over leverage themselves in crypto. And so there isn't actually too many people left in blockchain in general, even within Bitcoin. A lot of people just came in for the run and then they left when they got wrecked. So it's pretty cool just to have this more cozier community, but it would be sweet to have another community event, another hackathon kind of event, even discussions. We've missed that. Everything EOS, especially, used to do awesome weekend videos, and just not having those, I think that is another one of those marketing issue kind of things I've talked about, where we don't really have as much involvement, I think, from the community organically. We haven't seen that. And so Block One can't do everything. The Block One is one company in a whole world, right? And so I guess I'm almost wondering if we'll see VPs like Google Cloud help with the marketing and help with the community in some way, help with the incentives, because that, as awesome as tech is, you still need this type of forum. You still need people getting excited about your technologies, wanting to build on it. And if you don't have that, it makes it really challenging to progress as a community. And so that's one awesome thing that I think Ethereum has. They have the enthusiasm, even though they're kind of wrecked from some perspectives of scalability. They have tremendous enthusiasm for their network, and Bitcoin as well. Obviously, has the OG hodlers like myself. So I mean, they're like die hard. They're ride or die, right? And so we need to have if people within EOS expect the price to and the adoption to go up, the community itself also needs to step up in different ways. Whatever you can do to contribute to the community, whether it's a discussion, whether it's application ideas, whether it's coding, right? There's things that everybody can do, and I think we've lost that as a community. So I'm going to try to do my part and provide you guys news when it comes. But everybody can do a little something. So I would just ask all you guys to look within yourselves and see if there's anything that you might be able to do for this community, even if it's hosting a meetup digitally, a call. Let me know, because I'd love to be a part of it. And yeah, let's just do it. Like we had established in the past. And I know Cryptotype is one of the OGs. What's up? I know he's been doing his thing, and he's made a lot of videos over the years. And so that's just something that it'd be nice to get back to that nostalgic OG community involvement discussions kind of a thing, because we just haven't had it. And even the guys like EOS San Diego can't start to see those videos drop off, and even everything EOS, which was kind of the staple for, I think, the community, the rock, I would call. They were the rock. We've been kind of, I think, just over the past few months, and maybe some disappointment even with B1, I've noticed that interest has gone down. So I think let's just remain hopeful. Let's become interested again in EOS. Let's see what could be done to rally the troops, if you will, to have those discussions as a community, especially with the most recent news. Again, I will try to report here and have those discussions with you guys. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this channel. Hit the like button, consider subscribing, and until next time, guys, have yourselves a good night. This is Phoenix signing off. Peace.